Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming. My name is Marche. I'm the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. Before we introduce our guests and get started, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however funny, true, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. We're thrilled to bring you today's educational presentation. Those of you who may have seen our webinar on financial planning strategies in your 50s will recognize this is a companion to that piece. And maybe for a different set of audience, maybe you haven't seen the one in your 50s because you're past your 50s, but welcome. We welcome anyone to view this. This is good to know what strategies are appropriate at this age. Attendees are muted, but if you have a question, go ahead and use the chat box. And if we don't have a chance to get to your question before the end of today's presentation, go ahead and leave your phone number as well, and we will make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event. We want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. I'd love to introduce you to today's guests. Our moderator today is Libby Van Vliet, and she's with 10 Bridge Partners. And she handles everything from opening new accounts, changing contact information, making distributions, and handling incoming contributions. She believes in teamwork, professionalism, and lifelong learning. She loves to serve clients as they launch on their path to reach their goals with a sound financial plan. She's a native of Portland and enjoys outdoor activities with her family and her dog. So hello, Libby, go ahead and come off of mute and say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Marche. We're excited to be here, and I really look forward to Eric's presentation. And yes, please, any questions that come up, everyone put those in the chat box, and we'll make sure that Eric gets a chance to talk about them.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenter today. Eric Lawrence is the president and managing partner of 10 Bridge Partners in Portland, Oregon. As a certified financial planning practitioner, Eric knows that financial planning is as much about emotions as it is about finances. He advises clients to understand their own individual relationship to money, what excites them, as well as what keeps them up at night. Then the financial plan and resultant strategy have a much better chance of success. Eric and his team work closely with clients to make sure they honor this relationship and put them on a clear path guided by a sound financial plan tailored to their unique personal goals. Outside of financial planning, Eric enjoys the outdoors and spending time with his family. And Eric, I'm gonna go on to the next slide, and it'll be your chance to take over here.
Wonderful. That's my cue. I'm going to have to work on my bio. If someone ever says that they don't like the outdoors, I'm going to fall out of my chair. That would be an interesting end to your bio. I enjoy being indoors and avoid the outdoors at all costs. I'm kidding, of course, but welcome, everybody. I really appreciate you being here. We had a great discussion last week about some key financial planning concepts to consider in your 50s. And we thought it would be a great companion to move on to financial planning in your 60s and 70s and beyond. Most of us in our 50s are helping our aging parents while we're getting our kids through college. And now the discussion shifts to what our parents should be doing and what you should consider when you're entering that last phase of conceptually your life. And we know it's a difficult decision. In the 20 years or over 20 years that I've been doing this, one of the key things that I failed to take take into account when I decided to be a financial planner was that personal relationship and close relationship we do have with our clients. So what impacts them impacts us, not to the same degree it does to them. Obviously, we honor that, but still watching our clients age in place or not in place, and watching them pass can be difficult at times. But it also has allowed us to sit at the table through many conversations about what that looks like for our clients. We've seen the best practices, the worst practices. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I'm here to encourage you to take action and to follow some steps in making sure that your wishes are honored as you head into the end of your life. So one of the areas that is very important to establish in your 60s and 70s is, what do you want your end of life to look like? So how will you age through the years? It's inevitable. It's coming. We all have to face it. We start feeling it in our 40s and more acutely in our 50s. And each decade that goes by, they say it's worse and worse. I'm in my 50s now and trying to muscle my way through the aches and pains that represents. But all of us have a deadline, and we have a time that we need to plan for. So we think it's very important that you take a home safety inspection, and that you carefully plan for aging in place if that is your desire. Most of us want to age in place, so that's primarily why I say that. Although we have seen a very large trend amongst our clients of actually moving into assisted living facilities long before they have a need, primarily because they don't want to move later. They want to move once and they want to get it done. But I would say that the majority of the people we work with and have talked to, including our family, friends, and loved ones, is that aging at home and being in a familiar surrounding is very important to us. However, whether or not we can age at home is a completely different story. And there are many things that we need to look at within our home to make sure it's a safe and supportive place for us to live. According to the CDC, falls is the highest, or it's the leading cause of death of those 65 and older. And if you dig into that data a little bit deeper, it's area rugs is the #1 tripper, but it's usually a combination of factors that leads to this, such as poor eyesight and poor lighting in the home, or instability and area rugs or clutter on the floor, lack of handrails, things of that nature. How many steps are in your home? When you buy your home, we're usually in our 30s, 40s, maybe our 50s. These things aren't even a consideration for us. And aging in place is the farthest thing from our mind. When my father started to ail, we took out all the area rugs in his house, and he got really mad. I remember him saying, "Where's my area rugs? I want my area rugs back." But the #1 fall, and he could barely shuffle his feet, were area rugs. And so we got rid of them and had to play tough love with him. But being in control of your future requires a couple of things. And one of those is an honest assessment of your surroundings, and then adaptation to your evolving needs as you age. And if you don't do it, someone's going to do it for you. And we'll talk a little bit about that more as we go through here. I was really surprised nationally. There are 64 fall deaths per 100,000 people on average every year. And Oregon is twice that number. We're very high in this category. So in Oregon, we have 102 fall deaths per 100,000 people every single year. And the CDC predicted that by the year 2030, that there would be 7 fall deaths every single hour in this country. So it's a huge issue for people aging at home, and it's something that needs to be addressed. There are many things you can do to your home to make sure it's ready. One of the things I really encourage people to do, my call to action, is be ready for change, be open to change. It's coming, but you have to be adaptable and accept help from others. Ask your loved ones, ask your kids, ask those around you, your friends, for their help in helping you get ready. You can't do it alone. It's very hard to do, and you need to be flexible with your perception of how you want your life as you age so that you're ready. There are a couple of great resources available. The CDC has a foundation called STEADY, which is a foundation to prevent falls. We're going to put that up on the screen for you, but they put out a brochure called the Coordinated Care Plan and How to Prevent Falls. There's a lot of great information in that booklet. Talks about coordinating your care. What type of care do you want? If you want in-home care, what type of services are available to you? Assisted living, continuing care, retirement communities. So I really encourage people to look that one up, and I believe we'll put up the website for you shortly. There's also another study that was conducted by Legg Mason originally and Johns Hopkins University, and I believe Franklin Templeton has bought that information, but they have a great brochure called The Hidden Costs of Aging. Inside of that booklet is the home assessment checklist. And there's probably lots of things that we haven't thought about in our home that we need to make sure we take care of, or at least that we know that they're potential fall risks. I was talking with Libby the other day and telling her I keep my Kindle on my nightstand, and every time I have to get up in the middle of the night, I turn it on and I walk around my house, shining it on the ground so I can see where I'm going. When I first attended a presentation regarding this Franklin Templeton resource, the presenter recommended just go to Costco, buy a $30 tube light, an LED tube light, plug it in and throw it underneath your bed. Problem solved. Now you can see what's around your bed when you get up in the middle of the night and it's hard to do so. So there's lots of little things you can do to make your home a much safer place for you to age. And I encourage people to reach out to Advice Chaser if you'd like to talk with someone more about the things you can do, or look up these resources and take advantage of them. They're free, they're available online, and they're both very comprehensive.
So Eric, those are great resources.
Yeah.
And I heard you say being open to change.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of couples, that journey may not be parallel. There may be one spouse that really recognizes the need to move in the name of safety, and another spouse that just isn't quite there yet or doesn't see it. What have you experienced in talking with past clients, or any advice you could give on that conundrum?
Wow, that's a good one. That's a deep rabbit hole. Yes, we often see that there is a difference of opinion. When the couples are aligned, of course, it's much easier to make those decisions. I'm sorry to say it, guys, but it's usually the male in the relationship that's more resistant to change and moving into a facility. Interestingly enough, most people don't realize that long-term care insurance is much more expensive for females than it is for men. And when you ask the fundamental question, why? It's pretty simple, because men don't raise their hand and say, I want to go to care. Women do. So we're much more resistant to change, but I have seen it the other way around. So I don't want to pigeonhole us men into that corner and leave women out. When people are not on the same page, that's very difficult. What I would say is that I heard it really well put one time, that the difference or the delta between you making decisions about how you want to age and someone else making decisions about how you want to age is your dignity. I think we as men and some other, and women as well, look at moving into a facility or hiring a caregiver or remodeling the home so we're ready, or accepting help, is loss of control. I would encourage you to remember it is quite the opposite. It is taking control. Because if what you want is a secret, or if what you want is to remain the way you are and things not to change, life's got a funny sense of humor. And I would encourage everyone to remember that the best way for us to have control is to lay out a really sound plan to make the changes that need to be made before they're forced upon us. Because at the point they're forced upon us, again, the difference being our dignity, we will not have control anymore. And that's a very scary place to be. I have no easy fix for relationships, where if I did, I would be wealthy and probably on a beach right now with a really good suntan. But I have no magic pill for if couples can't decide on the best path forward. There has to be some level of compromise there. How you reach that compromise is really dependent upon you and your relationship and your communication style.
Thank you, Eric. Really powerful advice there.
Thank you. So one of the things we talk about with a lot of our clients is the transition of their estate. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, worrying about your home and your care, and then also worrying about my estate and where's it going to go. We have had clients who honestly didn't care to leave anything behind. And we have others who want to leave behind as much as they possibly can. I once had a friend tell me, Eric, just show me a financial plan where I write my last check on my deathbed. We can certainly do that. But I think to most of us, it's very important that we leave behind a meaningful legacy. However, one of the things I've really been working on with our clients lately is considering not leaving it behind, giving that legacy now. Watching your children take advantage of your good money habits, not to the point you're spoiling them, but wouldn't it be great if every year you had a big, family reunion that you hosted, if you have the money to do that? The way we determine whether or not you have the money to do that is through the carefully crafted financial plan. What we want to know is, what do you need to survive? What do you need for your care? And what kind of a safety margin are we going to put into that financial plan? And that safety margin can be as big or as small as someone wants. But someone who has wealth, and wealth defined as money that we will not outlive, and you have money that will go to your grave with you, then it's a good discussion to have of how would you like to meaningfully impact either charities or institutions that you're passionate about now, or your children or your grandchildren, paying for grandchildren's educations. So for us, it's a very important discussion to say, how much do I need to get through the rest of my life? And therefore, how much will I have left over? And then what is the best use of that money now? And how can I watch the people I love or the institutions or charities that I love benefit now from that generosity? It's an old saying, you can't take money with you. And it is really, really true. And it's really hard for us to give our money up once we've earned it. You've made this pile of money through your good decisions and good habits. And now I'm proposing to you that that gets turned around a little bit and you get more generous with helping those around you. But make sure you go through a carefully crafted financial plan with your advisor, so that you have the ability to give the money away before you do it. I'm not advocating you walk out on the street tomorrow with a blank checkbook and make everyone happy, although that would be pretty fun. But I would not advocate you do that without carefully thinking that through.
So Eric, you said that life has an interesting sense of humor. How do you, when you're making a financial plan with the plan to give now, what kind of emergency buffer might be built into that plan?
It's a really good question. So in financial planning, the way we do it at Tenbridge, at least, and I know, there's lots of different ways to create a financial plan. Financial plans are as diverse as people. I like to say it's the perfectly imperfect financial plan because it really honors you as an individual and is different from everybody else's. But I think it's important to think about your baseline expenses and how much money you need to make sure you have a roof over your head, you have groceries in your cupboards, that you can take care of your basic needs. We layer in fun money, vacations, long-term care expenses. And then the safety buffer might be just a simple equation of, well, I want to make sure that I have 30% more than I need, or I have 50%, or even if I want 100% more, I want you to double up what we're forecasting. And if I have money above and beyond that, then I'm ready to give that away. So I think it really depends, Libby, on who the individual is, what their tolerance for risk is, and how much safety margin they want in their plan to make sure that they're going to be safe, benefiting others now rather than later.
Thanks, Eric. That really makes sense.
Yeah. So the one thing that is important to remember in the transfer of your asset is the titling of your assets. It's extremely important. What I mean by that is you have joint tenants with rights of survivorship. Oregon is a joint tenant state. So here in this, underneath the survivorship laws, if I pass away, everything goes to my wife because it's jointly titled and there's no probate. Probate is the process by which the court gives your assets to your next of kin or whoever you want to benefit. So for us, it just passes automatically. However, in a state like Washington or Idaho or California that are community property states, that has to go through the probate process. So there are 4 assets that go to probate. Again, probate is that process where the court decides where your estate is going to go. There are 4. Community property is one of those. Singly owned assets. So if I own the house and my wife's not on the title to the house, then the house would have to go through probate before she would get it. That could be a 9-month process depending upon your state, and it can cost upwards of 2 to 3% of the value of the estate going through probate. So it's going to be expensive and time consuming. So singly owned assets, things titled estate of the insured. So if you haven't picked a beneficiary designation on your IRA or your 401k or your life insurance, by default, it's the estate of the insured or the estate of the decedent. That has to go through probate. Again, community property, and another title called tenants in common. So these 4 assets go through probate. And in order to avoid probate, I have to have a trust or I have to have it jointly owned. So how we title each of our assets has a big impact on how those are passed. And so working with an estate attorney is a really great resource to craft a trust or a carefully crafted estate plan. Please remember that a will in and of itself is only a letter to the probate court. A will does not make your estate exempt from the probate process. The downfalls of the probate process, of course, is that it's public. That information is made public and anyone can access it. So if your estate goes through probate, people can pick up on that and figure it out. It's also a time when people can come and lay claim to your estate if they want to, creditors, things like that. And so a trust avoids probate altogether. Now, which one is most appropriate for you is up to you and your estate planning attorney. You can also turn to your certified financial planning practitioner to ask some questions about the best titling of assets. But one of the things we really encourage people to do is check your beneficiary designations all the time. Even when people do that, we still have seen mistakes where an IRA gets left to someone they didn't intend it to go to, or they don't have a beneficiary designation at all. So continuing to check in on those things on a regular basis is critically important to making sure that your estate transfers exactly the way you want it to. I think we talked in our last webinar last week about the blended family, and this comes into play with the blended family quite acutely, because you might have a silo of investments that you don't necessarily want to go to your second spouse's family. You want it to go to your blood family. And so coming up with a carefully crafted estate plan is very important in that dynamic as well. So moving on, unless we have any questions about titling of assets. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a little bit of tough love, and I apologize in advance. The most success I have seen in transitioning of estates, in aging the way you want to with dignity, involves open and candid conversation with your loved ones, with your kids, with your grandkids, with those you hold dear. It is a very difficult conversation. There are many of us that are very resistant to the idea of sharing what we want for our end of life, sharing where our money is and how we got it, sharing where that money is going to go. Believe it or not, my attorney once told me that the number one thing people fight over is not the money. They fight over dad's old trench coat. They fight over mom's apron that she used to cook in, or mom's wedding ring. They fight over stuff because it's meaningful to them. So it's important to have an open and frank discussion with your kids or your loved ones, your family, whoever is going to be the person who's going to help you age in place, whoever is going to be the person to inherit, and discuss with them about what you want. This doesn't have to be a dialogue. It doesn't have to be a compromise. What it is this is what I want. I want to age in place. And this is what I have to achieve this goal. This is how I want it to look. And I need you to help. And this is how I help or hope or expect you to help. We have a process, we call it the family meeting, where you bring the family together and have these discussions. What I encourage people to do is to think about what are the ground rules. Just think of them right up front before you have the meeting with your loved ones. What are the ground rules, such as, I don't really want input on, my choice to die this way or to live that way. Whatever your ground rules are, setting those up ahead of time, discussing those before the meeting, such as no fighting, or no arguing, because these can be sometimes tense conversations, because as much as we don't want to face our end of life, our loved ones don't want to face our end of life either. And bringing both those groups to the table to have a meaningful conversation about what we want for our end of life is really important. I think the biggest thing is, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to talk about what you want. Don't be afraid to talk about your end of life and your money. I think if you show your loved ones by example, the best way to handle those difficult conversations only has a ripple effect and meaningful impact on those that come after you. Have those discussions now and continue to have open dialogue. The worst plans I see are the ones that are kept secret. And in the end, mom or dad, or both mom and dad, or whoever passes away, and suddenly there's a huge mess to be dealt with. Or in the case of my father, it was suddenly he was incapacitated and we all had to scramble to figure out what to do. Having that ahead of time is going to make sure that you have the end of life that you plan on. And don't wait too long to do it. It's just like my wife and I bought long-term care insurance last year. That is a purchase for my future self. That future self is a stranger to me, but that's an investment that I'm making in my own stability and my family's stability for myself in the future. So having those discussions now, making your plan now, writing it down, and so that your future self doesn't have to do that later, I think are very powerful. If you can't do it, if for some reason you can't talk to your family about your money or about what you want for care, I would highly recommend you just write a letter. Put it in an envelope, put it with your financial plan and your estate docs and everything else, get it organized for your loved ones and have that letter there for them so that if something does happen to you, massive stroke, you're no longer able to talk, you're no longer able to function, you have this letter that your kids can go to and say, well, this is what they wanted, or your loved ones can go to and talk about this is what they wanted. So I think financial planning, in your 60s and 70s, hopefully by now, you're either very near retirement or you're at retirement. You're thinking about the next 30 years, maybe even 40 years of your life, which is amazing to think about. And you're trying to make decisions about what is this going to look like for me? And it's a WAG. We call it a WAG. It's a wild guess. I'll omit the middle word, but we call it a WAG. Things can change, but at least now you set that out for yourself so that later you aren't scrambling to make those decisions. I jokingly say sometimes I keep a little notebook and I write down things that I don't want to be because I know that genetically I'm probably going to turn out like my grandfathers and father, but I always go, all right, don't be irritable when you're older, don't do this. And then I'm going to pull it out when I'm like 85 and go, okay, these are the things I'm not supposed to do. So talk to your future self and really make decisions between you and your future self about what your life looks like. You'll thank yourself for it. You'll sleep better at night and your family will sleep better at night because they will know what you want. And that's very important.
So Eric,
yeah.
Do you have thoughts about how children could encourage parents to have this important family meeting?
Swift kick in the keister? No. No, I know it's a very difficult conversation. I think you start with the softball questions. Have you thought about, what the next 10 years looks like to you and what you want to accomplish? Have you thought about goals that you have over the next 10 and 20 years and how can I play a part to help? I think, if your parents aren't open to the conversation about money and estate planning, it's probably not a good idea to walk up to them and say, so tell me how much money you got in your checking account. Probably not going to work very well. So I think you start where there is open dialogue, and then you hope that you can foster and encourage continuing dialogue down those other veins about the more sensitive subjects. I think those subjects are hard to talk about, but also letting your parents know that you really just want to honor what their wishes are. And if you don't know what their wishes are, then you can't do everything within your power to make sure that those come to pass. Letting them know that it's their thoughts and their control that you want to know about so that you're prepared and able to help them.
Great, Eric. So
Yeah.
that question maybe was about getting into the conversation.
Mhm.
So let's say that you have your family meeting.
Mhm.
Afterwards, what resources need to be prepared so that in the case that you're incapacitated or pass away, that your children can get the information that they need.
Mm.
In your experience, what have you seen? The children can't access something or they can't find something. Is
Mhm.
there kind of like a list of things and a suggestion of where to keep the things so that uh, uh, a child or an important person in their life can step in and move forward?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you for that. I know a lot of our clients just say they're going to hand their kids our business card and say, call Eric, he knows where everything is. But I think if you work with someone who is intimately familiar with all the different aspects of your life, that's, make sure your kids know who they are, whether it's an accountant, an estate attorney, a financial planner. The other way to do that would be to have a binder. One of the things I think most of us don't take into account is all the online accounts and passwords that we have. I don't know about you, but I got a spreadsheet like 100 cells long of all my different passwords. My kids knowing where that is would probably be very important. So I can create an inventory of these different items and keep them handy and simply tell the kids, if something happens to me, this binder has everything. I've seen people pass away without that kind of organization, and it takes months and months and months for the kids to sort through everything and figure it out from ground zero. So having that ready for your kids, I think would be very good. Some other things to think about, of course, are your documents, your healthcare directive. If you no longer can make healthcare decisions for yourself, who's going to make those decisions? Who's going to pull the plug on you if it's time to let go? You also have the power of attorney document that allows people to step in and manage your financial affairs. If suddenly mentally you can't manage your own checking account and pay your bills, who has the power of attorney to step in and make that happen? And then you have your will or your trust, which would, detail out what happens if something happens to you. Normally, estate planning attorneys will produce these 3 documents for you in one session. But I think having those documents in place is really important. Having your affairs organized is very important, and communicating very well with your family is kind of the third element of being ready.
Great inventory. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, what about the case when the resources that a person has put together are not enough to cover the cost of aging? They know that, and that might be one of the reasons that they don't want to have a family meeting. They don't want to talk through it. Do you have any advice for that scenario?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I almost have to think about that for a moment. Being able to afford care, it can be very expensive. We've had people we knew that were in care for 15 years and other people that were in care for 1 year. So it's really an unknown. If you don't have the assets, and I've seen this where you can't afford a formal care situation, maybe it's even more critical that you have that embarrassing conversation with your family, because in the end, they are your resource. And that's tough. But having that conversation would be better than waiting till the end. The Medicaid, the supplemental insurance through the Social Security Administration, Medicaid in Oregon, it's administered by the Oregon Health Plan, is designed to pay for care for people with low income and no assets. However, even 2 Social Security checks is usually more than the income limit. So it's really designed for people who have nothing and very, very little income. So your friends and your family become your best resource. And where you turn to from there, I'm not sure, but I would encourage you even more so that if you feel like it's embarrassing for you because you haven't quite gotten to the place where you're ready to pay for your own care, it's not a stigma. I mean, we make money such a calling card of success in America. It's terrible on our own psyche. What we need to realize is it's okay. It's okay. It's hard to balance life and saving money. You shouldn't have any shame in saying, I don't have enough to pay for my own care. I'm going to need the family's help, and this is what I need. Rely on your kids if you have them. You raised them. So us parents, we raised them. We changed their diapers. You know, it is true. You go out the way you came in, and it can be embarrassing, but and now it's your kids' turn. If you don't have kids, then it falls to your siblings, your nieces, nephews, and your friends. So hopefully you have someone out there that you can lean on and really talk and think outside the box. I think, you know, I was talking with my mother I don't know if she's on the call, but I was talking to my mother the other day while we were doing a little woodworking, and she was talking about rallying some of her neighbors. She lives in a community where there are lots of people her age. And she was talking about possibly talking to neighbors about splitting the cost of a caregiver that would come and, you know, come to one house and the next. And I had never thought of that. And I thought, that's a brilliant idea. That's thinking outside the box. You know, we all have a common need. Let's pull together and see if we can hire someone to come by each of our homes, maybe 4 hours, a couple times a week, to help me get things down from the closet or put away the Christmas lights, or I mean, whatever I need help with doing. So think outside the box. There are other ways. I know one of the cheapest, but probably most intrusive ways of getting care in your home is just to hire a live-in caregiver. There's a whole slew of people out there that for room and board and a small salary will come and live in your home and be an in-home caregiver. Thinking about roommates, you know, could you maybe have another elderly couple come and be roommates with you to save on cost and free up cash flow for a caregiver? So don't think that assisted living facilities are the only solution to an aging problem. I think there's many solutions out there. You just have to think outside the box and talk with others to come up with ideas, brainstorm.
Really creative thinking there. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, for sure.
These next couple questions are kind of getting back to the estate planning concept.
Mhm.
One, to your knowledge, is there an estate exemption from probate if the value is less than a certain number?
Yeah, I mean, there is the small claims process. So if your estate's under a certain level, you can do, it's like a short form. It's like the 1040 EZ. You know, you have the 1040 with the IRS, which is for people who are itemizing and have lots of deductions. And then you have the 1040 EZ. There is the short form, but it does still have to go through probate. And it is a much shorter process, but there's no such thing as an exemption where it doesn't pass at all. The only exemption I know of is the don't ask, don't tell exemption. Basically, if you have very little assets and you just give them to your kids when you pass and they don't say anything. So, but that's a whole different animal. That's just deciding, like, if you pass and you're living in an apartment and all you have is a checking account with money in it, and you make your kid a joint owner of that checking account before you pass, it's just going to pass to them and avoid probate altogether. Or if you have a gold collection in a shoebox, you know, don't ask, don't tell, just let them take it. And so anyway, those are legal things. So I should talk about it, but you understand what I'm saying. So I'm not aware of a legal framework by which an estate can pass outside of probate other than a trust or jointly held you know, titling of your assets that avoids probate.
And you were talking about the expense and length of time that probate can have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I know here in the state of Oregon, I think we have one probate clerk for the entire state or something ridiculous, or maybe it's the entire county. I can't remember which, but it's a 6 to 9 month process. And yeah, generally can cost about 2% to 3% of your estate value. So, you know, one of the things to think about is, you know, to get a will done by an attorney might cost you $500 to $1,000. To get a trust done, it might cost you $2,000 to $3,000. However, you're paying more now to save a lot more later. So it's one of those decisions we make of, well, I'm going to absorb the cost and get a trust done and spare my kids the expense of going through probate later. So there's very few instances where you really want your estate to go through probate. The example we always use is the brain surgeon. So one of the advantages of probate is it seals your estate forever. And a trust does not. So it's an important consideration. So what you have to think about is whether or not my estate might be subject to liability down the road. So if you have a family trust and all your money goes into a trust, and you were a brain surgeon, and 10 years after your death, someone says that you did something wrong and messed them up, if your estate went through probate, they have no recourse. If your estate is still out there because it never was closed officially, they do have recourse. Most of us, this doesn't apply to. I think it's very few of us that feel that, but part of the probate process is listing your estate in the newspapers for, I think it's 3 months or 4 months, something like 3 to 6 months. And in there, it says, if anyone has a claim to this estate, step forward and claim it now. Otherwise, it'll be forever closed. And so because you've given them that notice, the courts deem your estate to be closed after probate. But again, doesn't really apply to a lot of us. And I really encourage you to talk to your estate attorney about your particular situation and what is applicable to you. Certainly don't create a trust or a will because I say so. Go to your attorney and figure that out with them.
Right.
I
Well,
think we have, oh, sorry, breaking in here. I think we have time for about one more question.
Okay.
great.
And then I would just say to the attendees, if you have other questions, hurry and get them in. I might have room for one more after that.
Great. Well, Eric, it definitely seems like the expense of getting that will in place is important and valuable, and a good step rather than just writing something down on a piece of paper to get it official. Yeah, this last question is about long-term care and thinking about the finances of getting that done. Wondering if you could talk about, just different plans, different payment models that you're aware of.
Oh, for care facilities?
For long-term care, maybe going into it, looking at both ways. You go in without coverage in place versus you do.
So if maybe you can clarify the question for me a little bit. So do you mean as far as getting into a facility, paying for it out of insurance or paying for it out of pocket, and then what kind of facilities are available and to consider?
I think that'd be really useful to this general question.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can pay out of pocket. Always remember too, that if, we have clients in care all across, the country, but so it's varying different costs. It could be anywhere from $3,000 a month, and I've seen as high as $10,000 or $15,000 a month. It just depends on where you live and what kind of facility you go into and everything else. But always keep in mind that your income goes to help. So if you have 2 Social Security checks and a pension, that's part of the payment plan. And a lot of the care facilities, it's room and board and utilities. So it's kind of all inclusive. Some places you could pay $3,000-$4,000 a month, but that includes your 3 meals a day. Not that most 85-year-olds eat 3 meals a day, bless you if you do. But for those people, paying out of pocket is one option. The insurance is just a nice supplement to that to help cover the cost. For a lot of us, our home is going to represent one of the biggest assets we have towards paying for our care. It is the store of value that we have. So selling the home to create the cash can be very powerful. The most popular right now facilities are the CCRCs. It's a continuing care retirement community, and you pay a fee to get in, and then you pay a monthly fee to be there. They have the continuum of care at the CCRCs. So a lot of people will check in completely independent living. They have their own apartment, their own kitchen. They do everything on their own. And if they progress, or when they progress, it transitions into higher and higher levels of care. There's a toss up with the CCRC. So a CCRC, you would pay them a big deposit to move in. I've seen them anywhere from $100,000 up to $1 million to move in, but they in exchange give you a guarantee that they will never make you move because you don't have the money. So they're on the hook for caring for you. And the way they cover that risk is by having everyone pay the deposit. Some people will need that guarantee. Some people will not. Some of those give the money back to your estate when you pass, some don't. And so knowing the subtle nuances of how that works helps. But assisted living facilities, nursing homes, adult daycares, there's a lot of different options out there. And I believe the CDC manual and the the Franklin Templeton manual go into detail about each of those. Otherwise, we would spend the next half an hour talking about each of them and how they work. But you could reach out to Advice Chaser to ask to get more information, or you could go to one of these resources and read through them. They really will be great for you to learn about all those.
Yeah, a big topic for sure. Thanks
Yeah.
for talking through some of those options. And I think we're turning it back over to Marche.
Okay.
That's right. I want to thank everyone for being here and thank our guests for sharing this really important information. I think good for anyone at any age, even if you're not in your 60s. I mean, I learned a lot and I'm definitely not there yet, but I will be. So I appreciate that very much. On behalf of Advice Chaser, thank you so much for attending. Look for an email soon with a replay of this webinar, and you're welcome to share that with friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for you, your life, and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners is committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming. We'll see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Marcia.